Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, chapter number 15, the last chapter in the 7th canto. And we're already covered up to text number 40. Right? We were hearing about the Guru. We were hearing about the process of liberation. And we heard also about abominable actions of disciples and fallen sannyasis. All of these things were explained. Texts 36 to 39. Okay, text 40 was describing the process of liberation for householders. So, going on to the next section in this chapter, text 41 describes about the chariot, the analogy of a chariot, which is quite detailed here in this chapter. Usually when we describe the chariot, we keep it very basic. You know, the usual understanding is the senses are the horses, so that's here. And the mind is like the reins, that's all right. But then the rest of it is quite different. Usually we would say like the driver is intelligence, and we would say that the passenger is the soul, and the body is the chariot. So here in this section, it said the senses are like horses, the mind is the master of the senses, like the reins. And the objects of the senses, they're the destinations. So the objects of the senses, that's something we never heard before. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver. Yes, that's usually there. And then consciousness, which is spread throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Consciousness. So that is the symptom of the soul. Consciousness is spread throughout the body. And in the example, well, here in this verse, consciousness is the cause of bondage in this material world. So Srila Prabhupada talks about the material body and the cause of our entanglement in the material world. The same body, the senses, the mind can be the cause of liberation. The soul is the occupant of the chariot. The soul, the passenger on the chariot, is the occupant. The driver is intelligence. The mind is the determination to reach the destination. So one can reach the destination. Destination, of course, is Lord Vishnu, Parampadam, this goal of life. So consciousness, because of consciousness, we're in bondage. But the same consciousness, when it becomes Krishna conscious, then we can go back to Godhead. So the human body can be used to go back to Godhead, or it can also be used to go into the darkest region of ignorance. We have the independence, right? Mahat sevam dvara mohur vimuktes tamojaram yositam sangi sangha. It's up to us how we use the body, how we engage our mind. If we want to be liberated, we can. But we have to use it, we have to qualify, we have to do the right work. So the body's like a chariot or a car. Car can be used to go anywhere. So you can drive well, or you can drive carelessly. If you don't drive carefully, then you can have an accident. So Krishna gives us instruction how we can go back home, back to Godhead. But if we don't care to listen to instructions, then we'll stay in the material world. We have to hear carefully from Krishna and Krishna's devotees. We have to hear from the scriptures. Take lessons, then our life can become perfect. We have to overcome the bodily designations. Consciousness is the cause of bondage, and our consciousness can become purified by Bhakti Yoga. So material designations, they will keep us in bodily consciousness. Okay, going on next verse, text 42. 10 kinds of air acting within the body. They're like the spokes of the chariot wheels. And the top and bottom of the wheel are called religion and irreligion. Living entity in the bodily concept is the owner of the chariot. The Vedic Pranav mantra is the bow, and the pure living entity is the arrow, and the target is the Supreme Being. So interesting. So Prabhupada in the purport explains these different items of the chariot. Life air is the energy for all of our activities. So sometimes our activities are religious and sometimes they're irreligious. So they're compared to different parts of the chariot wheel. And when we want to go back to Godhead, then our target is Lord Vishnu. But when we forget Krishna, we don't understand what is the goal of life. So the bodily concept of life is very strong. But the bow and arrow, the arrow, with the help of the bow, they're compared to the transcendental chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. And they can bring us towards the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada then, in the purport, he quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He's explained about the words bow and arrow, and he says we may argue that Krishna and the living entity have become enemies. However, the Supreme Lord may become the enemy of the living being. That is his pleasure. And he gives an example about how Bhishma was fighting with Krishna, and Bhishma would throw his arrows at Krishna. They were compared to love bites, like the young man or the young woman, when they kiss each other, they will sometimes bite each other out of their love. So the conditioned soul, it tries to come to the Lord by throwing an arrow at him. We throw our arrow at Krishna and Krishna takes pleasure, and the living entity gets the profit of going back home, back to Godhead. Just like Arjuna pierced the fish to win the hand of Draupadi in the archery contest. He pierced the Adaramina, the fish within the chakra, and he won Draupadi. So in the same way, the arrow of chanting the holy name, we can pierce Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. By performing devotional service, we get the benefit of going back home, back to Godhead. So that's the significance of the bow and the arrow. Then 43, 44 talks about different conceptions of life, which are influenced by the different modes of nature, some often passion and ignorance, sometimes also sometimes we'll be in the mode of goodness, but that's also pollution. To do good or to do bad, both things are not good. In Krishna consciousness, we have to understand we have to do everything for Krishna. It's not just doing something good or something bad, but do it for Krishna. The goal of life is to go back to Godhead. So we don't want to be caught up in the modes of nature, the tamagun, the rajagun, or even the sattvagun. Trying to be a good man will also keep you in the material world. You have to become very powerful, conquer the enemies. Don't be attached to being a good man or a bad man in this material world. Goodness and badness are all the same. They are just influenced by the three modes. So Lord Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, rise above the modes. If we're in the modes of nature, then we can't go back to Godhead. We have to get free of the modes of nature. And that means we have to surrender to Krishna. The best way to get free of the modes of nature is by surrendering to Krishna. Then get the mercy of Krishna and the Guru. Then our life is successful. Prabhupada said one must be very bold so that he can conquer these enemies of Krishna consciousness. Not caring for the good and bad of this material world, one must boldly propagate Krishna consciousness. Right? The different things we have to conquer, the passion and the ignorance, the attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these different things, these are all the enemies. We want to conquer over these things, We want to come out of the modes of nature, to come up to the transcendental platform. Right? We want to get free of this material energy. So go ahead to text 45. As long as we have a material body, we are not fully under, it's not fully under our control. We have to have the lotus feet of the devotees. By the lotus feet of the devotees, by their mercy, we can get the sword of knowledge. And with that power of knowledge, we can conquer the enemies which were mentioned. We should be able to put our own transcendental bliss. We should be able to merge into the Lord's own transcendental bliss and give up the body and to awaken our spiritual identity. So we want to get free of the material body. Srimad Bhagavatam. Human body. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, another example is given about the bodies compared to a boat, right? In text 46, the body is compared to a chariot. But here, in this text 45, the body is compared to a boat. And then the captain of the boat, of course, is the spiritual teacher. And the favorable breezes are the instructions of Krishna, or the scriptures. And the body, the human body, is the boat, the most valuable boat. So we have to use all these facilities, the captain, the breeze, and the boat, use all these things to cross over the ocean of nations. In order to do that, we have to serve the spiritual master very nicely. We have to get his mercy. By the mercy of the Guru, we get the mercy of Lord Krishna. So Prabhupada gives a lot of references to different verses from the Bhagavad Gita to support this, to show that we can cross over this ocean of material existence by taking the shelter of the lotus feet of a spiritual master. So text 46 describes what happens if we don't take shelter of Krishna. If we don't take shelter of Krishna, then what happens to the body, the senses? Then the senses are going to engage in sense gratification. We're going to become materially contaminated. We'll become attracted to eating and sleeping and mating. In other words, the horses and the chariot driver are going to be thrown into the dark well of material existence. Again, we're put into a dangerous and fearful situation of repeated birth and death. This is what happens if we don't follow. We need the protection of Krishna and Balaram or Gornitai. Without their help, we can never get out of the ignorance of material existence. Okay, going ahead, text 47 describes about two kinds of activities, pavriti and nivriti. Pavriti, positive engagement, doing things. Nivriti, giving up things. So pavriti means raising oneself from a lower to a higher condition of materialistic life, which is not very good. A higher condition of materialistic life, we just become more attached, we won't become comfortable. But nivriti means the end of material desire. By pavriti, we suffer, we get entangled in the material world. But by nivriti activities, we get purified, and we become fit to enjoy blissful life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna also talks about pavriti cha, nivriti cha, janana vidura suraha. What should be done and what should not be done. Right? Prabhupada talks about nonsense. He said, no nonsense. No meat, no fish, no egg, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex. These are all nivriti. Don't do this. But pavriti, chant the holy name. Do that. Chant the holy name. Read the scriptures. Do that. These activities are encouraged. Any questions so far? Parasiva Prabhu, any questions?
No, Maharaj.
Okay. So we'll go ahead. We're going through this final chapter here. Text 40, 48, 49, speaking about different yagyas, ritualistic ceremonies, or agnihotras. Usually often they do things like kill animals, or they burn valuable things, they put grains in the fire. They do these things just to get material desires, to satisfy their material desires. And they perform these kind of activities, sometimes even construct temples for demigods, building a resting house or gardens, digging wells for water, some place to distribute food, or performing activities for the public welfare. These are all symptomized by attachment to material desires. People are attached to material desires, so they do all of these things. So Narada Muni is speaking to Maharaj Yudhisthira. In text 51 he says, "My dear Yudhisthira, when oblations of ghee and food grains like barley and sesame are offered in sacrifice, they turn into celestial smoke, which carries one to higher planets like the kingdoms of Duma, Ratri, Krishna Paksha, Dakshina, and ultimately the moon. Then, however, the performers of sacrifice descend again to earth to become herbs, creepers, vegetables, and food grains. These are eaten by different living entities and turned to semen, which is injected into female bodies. Thus one takes birth again and again. So this verse is describing what happens to the conditioned soul in the material world, how they're taking birth again and again. They may be elevated up to higher planets for some time, and it says that they're turned into smoke, and the smoke carries them to higher planets, different kingdoms, and higher up in the universe. But then again, they have to come down, and they become plants or vegetables, and then they get eaten by different living entities, and then they turn to semen, which is put into the female body, and you get another material body again. And there's no guarantee it will be a human body. It can be an animal body. So like this, living entities are staying in the material world, and they're going up and coming down, going up to higher planets, and they come down. Right? You may go up, become a Brahma, or you may become one of the four Kumaras, or you become some sage up there in the higher planets. And then you have to come back down, and you have to be naked, you have to take part in some activities. Okay, text 52 describes more about moving up and down in this material world. We're told about a twice-born Brahmana. So, he's fortunate, he's born by parents who did Garbhadan. They did the Garbhadan samskar. And so they give birth to a child who is a twice-born Brahmana. So it's a good start to life. But they have to go on. That's just the start. The Garbhadan is just one of the samskars. There are 10 samskars in the course of the life. So Garbhadan is just the first one. So some people they think, we did Garbhadan samskar, they don't do any more. But of course you have to do Anaprashna, and you have to do so many other one. When the child goes for education, you have one. When the child gets Gayatri Mantra, you have one. When the child gets married, you have one. So all of these different rituals, they help to purify the living entity for higher purposes, so that they can go on to become self-realized. Like there's a marriage is also a samskar, and then finally the funeral ceremony. So Brahmanas, they should not be interested in materialistic activities. And they will offer sacrifices in full knowledge into the working senses, which are illuminated by the fire of knowledge. So Brahmanas are supposed to be theists, they're supposed to believe in God, and they're supposed to be training, should want to acquire perfect spiritual knowledge so that they can go back to Godhead. So Prabhupada writes, our Krishna consciousness movement is therefore training devotees to give up the Pavriti marg and accept the Navriti marg in order to return home back to Godhead. So Prabhupada is getting devotees to give up the Pavriti marg. That Pavriti marg means the path of sense enjoyment. You still have desires, you want to enjoy the material world. So Prabhupada gets devotees to give these up, because the desires will never end. We'll always want more and more and this and that. It will go on endlessly. So we have to accept Nivriti marg, the path of renunciation. That is needed. So we encourage the devotees to aim like that. Don't go for the sense gratification, go for the renunciation. Take the path of Nivriti marg. Prabhupada writes, a Krishna conscious person can understand that performing yajna according to karmakanda system is a useless waste of time, and that merely giving up karmakanda and accepting the process of speculation is also useless. So Prabhupada is explaining, you see, that the only useful thing actually is Krishna consciousness. You should study the Krishna conscious literature. Don't get into the karma kandi section on all these things of rituals. Don't waste your time. Just focus on Krishna so that you can go back to Godhead. All right, text 52. Karma kanda, jnana kanda are like a pot of poison. And one who takes to such a life is doomed. Karma kanda means you take birth again and again. And the jnana kande, they fall down again to this material darshan. Only by worship of the Supreme Lord do you have the chance of going back home, back to Godhead. Okay? Okay, next text. The mind is always agitated by waves of acceptance and rejection. Sometimes we want this, sometimes we don't want this. So this is the business of the senses. Senses are meant to be controlled by the mind. And they should be offered into one's words. One's words should be offered into the sacrificial fire. All the activities should be offered into the mind, and the mind should be offered into one's words. One's words should be offered into the aggregate of all alphabets, and that should be offered into the concise form Omkara. Omkara should be offered into the point Bindu. Bindu should be offered into the vibration of sound, and that vibration of sound into the life air. Then the living entity, who is all that remains, should be placed in Brahman, the Supreme. This is the process of sacrifice. Okay? So dealing with the mind is always agitated. I want this, I don't want that, I like this, I don't like that. This way living entity is in this condition, sometimes accepting, sometimes rejecting. By the influence of Maya, we get carried away into these two things. Okay, then text 54. Describing the path of ascent, the soul going out or up in this material world. The living entity enters the different worlds of fire, the sun, the day, the end of the day, the bright fortnight, the full moon, and the passing of the sun in the north, along with their presiding demigods. So when he enters Brahmaloka, he enjoys life for many millions of years. Finally, his material designations come to an end. He then comes to a subtle designation. And then upon the annihilation of his causal state, he gets a pure state where he identifies with the super soul. In this way, the living entity becomes transcendental. So Maharaj, Narada Muni is describing how the living entity, the soul, can go out of the material world. Right? This is the path out of the material world. You can see. In text 55, it's described as Devayana, the process of elevation known as Devayana. Of course. He enters Brahmaloka, can enjoy a life of millions of years, and finally his material destination comes to an end. Then he comes to a subtle designation. And finally he gets his pure state, identifying with the super soul. A difficult path to get out of the material world. Prabhupada writes here in the purport 55, this gradual process of elevation for self-realization is meant for those who are truly aware of the absolute truth. After repeated birth on this path, which is known as Devayana, one attains these consecutive stages. One who is free from all material desires, being situated in the self, need not traverse the path of repeated birth and death. So this kind of elevation of the soul, this is described also in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Oh, no, is it chapter 8? I think it describes about the living entity going out through this path. It can go up gradually. Right? If we're free of material desires, all material desires, we're situated in the self, then we don't need to traverse this path of repeated birth and death. Anyway, this is the path of Devayana. Text 56 says, even though situated in a material body, one who is fully aware of the paths known as Pitriyana and Devayana, and who thus opens his eyes in terms of Vedic knowledge, is never bewildered in this material world. So Pitriyana, the planets of the forefathers, and Devayana, so being guided by the spiritual master, very important. Bhagavad Gita, Acharya Upasanam, one must approach the Acharya for real knowledge. And Tadvigyanartam Sagaram Eva Begachet. You must approach the Acharya, get perfect knowledge. When guided by the spiritual master, you can get the ultimate goal of life. Then text 57. He who exists internally and externally, at the beginning and end of everything, and of all living beings, as that which is enjoyable, and as the enjoyer of everything, superior and inferior, is the supreme truth. He always exists as knowledge and the object of knowledge, as expression and the object of understanding, as darkness and as light. Thus he, the Supreme Lord, is everything. So Prabhupada's purport is interesting. He says here, the Vedic aphorism, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, is explained. It's also explained in the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam. Aham eva sameva gre. The Supreme Lord existed in the beginning. He exists after the creation and maintains everything. And after destruction, everything merges in him. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Prakritim Yanti Mamikam. Thus the Supreme Lord is actually everything. In the conditioned state, we are bewildered in our understanding. But in the perfect stage of liberation, we can understand that Krishna is the cause of everything. So then Prabhupada quotes Brahma Samhita, how Krishna is the supreme controller. This is the perfection of knowledge, that the Supreme Lord is everything. Then text 58 goes on, we may consider the reflection of the sun from a mirror to be false. It has its factual existence. Accordingly, to prove by speculative knowledge that there is no reality would be extremely difficult. Right? So this is a esoteric verse. You may consider the reflection of the sun from a mirror to be false. It has its fact, but that doesn't mean the sun does not exist. The reflection may be false, but the sun exists. In the same way, to prove by speculative knowledge that there is no reality would be extremely difficult. So, Srila Prabhupada's purport, the impersonalists try to prove that the varieties in the vision of the empiric philosopher are false. The impersonalist philosophy, Vivartavada, generally cites the acceptance of a rope to be a snake as an example of this fact. Right? So the Mayavadi philosophy, Vivartavada, and the example they give, the rope, people say, oh, it's a snake, and we become afraid of it. But it's only a rope. So this is a philosophy of illusion. So Prabhupada said the impersonalists tried to prove that the varieties in the vision of the empiric philosopher are false. The Mayavadis want to say everything is one. There's only oneness. There's no variety. So, just as a rope seen to be a snake is false. The Vaishnavas say, however, that although the idea that the rope is a snake is false, there is such a thing as a snake, that's real, and there's also a rope, which is also real. So snakes are real. You can't say they're all illusion. The representation of the rope as a snake is false. That's illusion. To say that the rope is a snake, that is false. But it doesn't mean that the snake is not real. There can be snakes. We know there are snakes in the world. Similarly, in the same way, this world, which is full of varieties, is not false. This world is not false. It's a reflection of the reality of the spiritual world. Mayavadis like to say this world is false, only the Brahman is truth. But the Vaishnava philosophy is that the world is real, but it's temporary. So the reflection of the sun from a mirror is nothing but light within darkness. So it's not exactly sunlight. Without the sunlight, the reflection would be impossible. In the same way, the varieties in this world would be impossible unless there were a real prototype in the spiritual world. There has to be the real object in order for something else the reflection to be there. So the Mayavadi philosophers, they cannot understand this. But a real philosopher must be convinced that light is not possible at all without a background of sunlight. So the jugglery of words used by the Mayavadi philosophers to prove that this material world is false may amaze inexperienced children. But a man with full knowledge knows perfectly well there cannot be any existence without Krishna. So the Vaishnava insists that we have to accept Krishna. So Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 7.1. Now hear, O Arjuna, simply by hearing, with your mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So we have to raise our faith in Krishna and Krishna's instructions. Then we can understand reality. We should understand how Krishna's material and spiritual energies are working, how he is present everywhere, although everything is not him. Of course, this is the philosophy taught by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that everything is inconceivably, simultaneously one and different. And this is the perfect philosophy taught by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Everything is an emanation from Krishna, but it is not that everything must be worshipped. Speculative knowledge cannot give us the reality, but will continue to be imperfect. The scientists are trying to prove that there's no God. Scientists are trying to say that everything is happening because of the laws of nature. But this is imperfect knowledge. Nothing can work unless directed by the Supreme Lord. Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita, of course. Behind everything is Krishna. And Madhvacharya also says the background of everything is the Supreme Lord Vasudeva. Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. This can be understood by a Mahatma who is perfect in knowledge. Such Mahatmas are rarely seen. Very rare in this Kali Yuga. It's very rare to get pure devotees. Very difficult. So, this is an important example, common example often given, this Vivartivada, this idea that the rope is a snake, and so because we think it's a snake, we're afraid of it. So the same way, people are afraid of the material world, they're afraid of the material energy. They think, oh, it's all Maya, it's all... But we can make it all spiritual. If we use it in the right consciousness, the devotee sees everywhere Krishna, he sees the opportunity for Krishna's service. So he doesn't worry about material energy. He just thinks, let me serve Krishna, let me do some service for Krishna. We're not afraid of money. We take money and use it for Krishna's service, to build big temples. So the Mayavadis, they want to make everything one, no variety. Everything is one, there's only Brahman. But we don't agree. We say there's oneness, but there's also difference. The living entity and the Lord are one and different. The Lord is the Param Brahman, and we are tiny sparks of the Brahman. Okay, text 59. In this world there are 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. But the body is not a reflection of them, nor a combination or transformation of them. The body and its ingredients are not distinct or amalgamated. All such theories are insubstantial. So the body is being described that it's not a reflection of the elements. It's not a combination. Srila Prabhupada explains this purport, this verse. A forest is certainly a transformation of the earth, but one tree does not depend on another tree. If one is cut down, this does not mean that the others are cut down. The forest is neither a combination nor a transformation of the trees. The best explanation is given by Krishna himself. Mayatatam idam sarvam, jagad avyaktamurtina. By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. The forest is not a combination nor a transformation of the trees. Not a combination nor a transformation of the trees. So Krishna has many different energies. Parasya Shakti Vividaiva Shruyate. So different energies are working in different ways. The energies are existing, and Krishna is also existing at the same time, because everything is his energy. So he is one with everything, and at the same time he's different from everything. So we make different speculative theories, we try to understand the soul, we say the Atma, the living force, that it's a combination of matter, that matter is a transformation of the soul, or that the body is part of the soul. Of course it's not. All the Lord's energies are simultaneously existing. We have to understand that the Supreme Lord, although he is everything, he is not present in everything. Yeah, he's everywhere, but at the same time he's not present in everything. So Krishna must be worshipped in his original form as Krishna. He can also show himself in any one of his different energies. When we worship the deity in the temple, the deity appears to be made of stone or wood. But because the Lord does not have a material body, he is not stone or wood. But stone and wood are not different from him. So by worshipping stone and wood, we get no result. But when the stone and wood are represented in the Lord's original form, by worshipping the deity, we get the desired result. So this is Achintya Bhed Abheda Tattva. This is how Lord Chaitanya explains how Krishna is present everywhere and anywhere in the form of his energy to accept service from the devotee. Right? That's not difficult to understand. That the stone and wood, when it's put into the form of the Lord in his original form, and when we worship it, then we get the desired result. So we don't just worship stone and wood, but we worship stone and wood when they're put into the form of the Lord. Because the Lord understands the mind of the devotee. We want to worship the form of the Lord. We don't want to worship just a block of stone. All right, text number 60. Because the body is formed of 5 elements, it cannot exist without the subtle sense objects. Therefore, since the body is false, the sense objects are also naturally free or temporary. When a substance, going ahead, text 61, when a substance and its parts are separated, the acceptance of similarity between one and the other is called illusion. While dreaming, one creates a separation between the existences called wakefulness and sleep. It is in such a state of mind that the regulative principles of the scriptures, consisting of injunctions and prohibitions, are recommended. So different stages of consciousness. While dreaming, we create a separation between the existence called wakefulness and sleep. So you have sleep, then you have dreaming, then you have wakefulness. In such a state of mind, the regulative principles of the scriptures, injunctions and prohibitions are recommended. Purport. In material existence, there are many regulative principles and formalities. If material existence is temporary or false, this does not mean that the spiritual world is also false, although it is similar. That one's material body is false or temporary does not mean that the body of the Supreme Lord is also false or temporary. The spiritual world is real, and the material world is similar to it. An example is given. In the desert, we sometimes find a mirage, But although the water in a mirage is false, this does not mean that there is no water in reality. Water exists, but not in the desert. Similarly, nothing real in this material world, but reality is in the spiritual world. Nothing is real in this material world, but reality is in the spiritual. The Lord's form and His abode, like Goloka Vrindavan, are eternal realities. From Bhagavad Gita, we understand there is another prakriti, or nature, which is real. And this is explained by Lord Krishna in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Again and again the day comes, and all living beings are active, and again the night falls, O Partha, and they are helplessly dissolved. Yet there is another nature which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. That supreme abode is called unmanifested and infallible, and it is the supreme destination. When one goes there, he never comes back. That is my supreme abode. The material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. The material world is temporary or false, but the spiritual world is an eternal reality. So we are hearing about the spiritual world as it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. There's only 2 places in Bhagavad Gita where the spiritual world is described, briefly. But you can read more about the spiritual world in Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam you can read descriptions of the kingdom of God. That's in 3rd canto. So the supreme abode is described as unmanifested and it's infallible. And one who goes there never comes back. Material world is just a reflection of the truth. Okay, we'll just read one more verse, 62. After considering the oneness of existence, activity, and paraphernalia, and after realizing the self to be different from all actions and reactions, the mental speculator, or Muni, according to his own realization, gives up the 3 states of wakefulness, dreaming, and sleep. So the 3 words, Bhav Advaita, Kriya Dvaita, and Dravya Dvaita, are explained in the following verses. However, one has to give up all the non-duality of philosophical life in the material world and come to the actual life of reality in the spiritual world in order to attain perfection. We have to give up that illusory life in the material world, and we have to come to the real life, the actual life in the spiritual world. When one understands that result and cause are one, and that duality is ultimately unreal, like the idea that the threads of a cloth are different from the cloth itself, one reaches the conception of oneness called Bhav Advaita. So, let's hear that again. That the result and cause are one, and that duality is ultimately unreal. Like the idea that the threads of a cloth are different from the cloth itself. All right? Certainly there's a difference between threads of a cloth and cloth. So the result and cause are one. We should understand that result and cause are one, and that duality is ultimately unreal. So this conception of oneness, this is called Bhav-Advaita. Then, Maharaj Narada Muni is describing more. My dear Yudhisthira, when all the activities one performs with his mind, words and body are dedicated directly to the service of the Supreme Lord, one reaches oneness of activities called Kri Advaita. Alright? So we had oneness, the conception of oneness there in Bhav-Advaita. Now here we have the conception of oneness in activities. This is called Kri Advaita. All the activities with our body, mind and words are dedicated to the service of the Lord. Then one reaches oneness of activities. Krishna consciousness movement is teaching people how to come to the stage of dedicating everything to the service of Krishna. So Prabhupada quotes 9:27, Ya karoshi ya jashnasi, offering everything. Whatever we do, whatever we eat, whatever we think, and whatever we plan, should all be done for the advancement of the Krishna consciousness movement. This is oneness. There's no difference between chanting for Krishna and working for Krishna. They're all one, but we must be guided by the spiritual master about this oneness. We should not manufacture our own oneness. So that's Kriya Dvaita. And then, when the ultimate goal and interests of oneself, one's wife, one's children, one's relatives, and all other embodied living beings is one, this is called Dravya Dvaita, or oneness of interest. The actual interest of all living entities. Indeed, the goal of life is to return home, back to Godhead. This is the interest of one's own self, wife, children, disciples, one's friends, relatives, countrymen, and all humanity. The Krishna consciousness movement can give directions for management by which everyone can partake in Krishna conscious activities and reach the ultimate goal, Swarta Gatim. This objective of everyone's interest is Vishnu, but people do not know this. They're making plans to fulfill so many interests in life. Krishna consciousness movement's trying to bring everyone to the highest interest. The process may be different, but the aim is one. People should follow it to achieve the ultimate goal of life. But people are thinking of different interests, and blind leaders are misleading them. Everyone is trying to reach the goal of complete happiness materially, because people do not know what complete happiness is. So they're materially diverted towards different interests. So let's hear that Dravya Advaita again. When the ultimate goal and interests of oneself, one's wife, one's children, relatives, and all other embodied living beings is one. This is called Dravya Dvaita, or oneness of interest. The ultimate goal of all living entities is one. Oneness in interest. Okay, I'll go ahead. In normal conditions, in the absence of danger, a man should perform his prescribed activities according to his status of life, with the things, endeavours, process and living place that are not forbidden for him, and not by any other means. This instruction is given for men in all statuses of life. Generally, society is divided into brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, sannyasis, grihastas, brahmanas, kshatriya, vaishya, sudra. Everyone must act according to his position and try to please the Supreme Lord. That will make one's life successful. Right? So the importance of prescribed duty. Everyone has prescribed duty according to his position in society. So everyone should act just to please the Supreme Lord. Then everyone will be happy. If everyone does their duty just to please the Supreme, everyone will be happy. So this is all about occupational duties. One should perform his duty according to these instructions, as well as other instructions given in the Vedas, just to remain a devotee of Krishna. Thus, even while at home, one will be able to reach the destination. The goal of life is Krishna, therefore, by Vedic principles or by materialistic activities, if one tries to reach Krishna, that is the perfection of life. Krishna should be the target. Everyone should try to reach Krishna from any position. Krishna accepts service from anyone. Everyone, women, children, Vaishya, Sudra, they can all approach the supreme destination. We shouldn't think it's only for sannyasis and brahmacharis. No, a grihastha householder can also reach Krishna, but he must become a pure devotee. He must give up his material desires. And we'll see the example here now, the next verse. Narada Muni says to Maharaj Yudhisthira, because of your service to the Lord, all of you Pandavas defeated the greatest danger posed by numerous kings and demigods. Just by serving the lotus feet of Krishna, you conquered great enemies and were like elephants, and you collected ingredients for sacrifice. By the Lord's grace, may you be delivered from material involvement. So Maharaj Yudhisthira was playing the part of an ordinary householder, and he was asking Narada Muni about how a person who's entangled in family life, how can he be delivered? So Narada Muni encourages Maharaj Yudhisthira. He says, you're already on the safe side, because you, along with your entire family, are all pure devotees of Krishna. By Krishna's grace, the Pandavas conquered in the battle of Kurukshetra, and they were saved from many dangers, not only by kings, but even by the demigods sometimes. So they're a practical example of how to live in security and safety by the grace of Krishna. Everyone should follow the example of the Pandavas. They showed us how to be saved by the grace of Krishna. Our Krishna consciousness movement is intended to teach how everyone can live peacefully in this material world, and at the end of life, return home back to Godhead. In the material world, there's always dangers at every step. But if we take shelter of Krishna without hesitation and stay under the shelter of Krishna, he can easily cross the ocean of nations. To the devotee, this ocean of nations becomes like a puddle of water in the hoofprint of a calf. A pure devotee, without embarrassing himself by trying for elevation in so many ways, he stays in the safest position as a servant of Krishna, and thus his life is eternally safe without a doubt. It's a very important point Prabhupada's making, that just instead of making a fool out of ourselves, trying to do something very difficult, if we just remain a servant of Krishna, then our life will be useful. So now Narada Muni is going to reveal something about his own life. He said, long ago, in another Mahakalpa, a different millennium of Brahma, he said, I was a Gandharva known as Upabarhan, and I was very respected by the other Gandharvas. So Narada Muni previously was he was in Gandharva Loka, and he's going to tell about his fall down. In Gandharva Loka, the people are very beautiful and they're all expert in singing. But Narada Muni fell down from there, he became a Sudra. Even though cursed by the Prajapatis to become a Sudra, in his next life after that, he became the son of Lord Brahma. Brahma dies at the end of a life of many millions of years. The day of Brahma is 1,000 ages taken together. So Krishna can remember things which happened millions of years ago. And Narada Muni, because he's a pure devotee, he can also remember incidents which happened in past life, millions and millions of years ago. So Narada Muni said he had a beautiful face and a pleasing, attractive body. He was well decorated. I was pleasing to the woman, and I was bewildered, always feeling lusty desires. So Gandharva Loka, we said everyone's very good looking, very beautiful, decorated nicely. So Upabarhana was very expert to decorate himself, to attract the women. So he became a playboy. And to be a playboy is not very good. It leads to fall down, trying to take advantage of women. So Prabhupada explains it's better for the men not to mix with women. But in the low class, in the Sudra community, men and women mixed openly. There's no culture, no education in the age of Kali. People are not trained spiritually. Everyone is therefore considered a Sudra. When the people become Sudras, then it's not very good. They manufacture their own way of life, and they become more and more unfortunate. They're always disturbed. So Narada Muni describes, he said, once there was a Sankirtan festival to glorify the Supreme Lord, the Gandharvas and Apsaras were invited to take part in it. Nice Sankirtan festival. But Narada Muni said, as Upabarhana, he began, he said many women were there, and he began singing the glories of the demigods. So the Prajapatis, they cursed him that you have committed an offense. So may you become a Sudra, devoid of beauty. So the kirtan is meant for glorifying the Supreme Lord. So he was cursed to become a Sudra. So at next birth, he took birth as a Sudra from the womb of a maidservant. But he was fortunate, he got the opportunity to serve Vaishnavas who had Vedic knowledge. And therefore, in the next life, he got the opportunity to take birth as the son of Lord Brahma. So he was lucky. So the chanting of the holy name is so powerful. By this chanting, even grihastas can easily get the ultimate result, just like people in the renounced order. So in this way, Narada Muni has explained to Maharaj Yudhisthira about this teaching. He's telling the Pandavas, you're very fortunate that you're all great saints, you can purify the planets. So Krishna is living confidentially with you in your house, just like your brother. You're so fortunate. The Supreme Lord has come and He's living with you. He's acting as your best well-wisher, your friend, your cousin, your worshipable director and your spiritual master. So Narada Muni prays that Lord Krishna will be pleased with us. And Sukadeva Goswami concludes the chapter. He describes how Maharaj Yudhisthira learned everything from Narada Muni, and he felt great pleasure, he felt great ecstasy, and he began to worship Lord Krishna. Narada Muni was worshipped by Krishna and Maharaj Yudhisthira, and then he went away. And Maharaj Yudhisthira heard about Krishna. He was struck with wonder. Okay. So that's the end of this chapter. We'll stop here, Prabhus. If there are any questions, anybody? Anything?
Maharaj, this happened before Mahabharata war, Kurukshetra.
This what? The voice.
Before Kurukshetra war, Mahabharata war.
Oh, this was before Kurukshetra? Yes.
Yes, Maharaj. So Narada Muni was giving example that you were delivered in Kurukshetra war.
Is he? Where?
From Kurukshetra war.
Where did he say that?
That read in some verse.
I didn't see it anywhere.
Okay, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, so we'll stop here.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your association, kind of you. We wish you good luck in your studies of the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam, Maharaj.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.